Hi, welcome to part 5 of the Walnut and Maple desk build series. In this video, I'm going to be tackling these spacers and the knockdown joinery. So this isn't going to be the biggest desk in the world, but it is big enough that it won't fit through the front door of its ultimate owner if I don't make everything knockdown. So the design on these spacers did change a little bit from what I was originally envisioning, in that I had to build in that knockdown joinery to be able to separate the desktop assembly from the lower case so that everything can be moved through the door, put in place, and then put back together. The next step before I can do anything else is to create the spacers that go between the top section and the bottom section of the desk. In order to do that, I'm going to use a pattern. What I've got is a decorative cut on the front and the back of the spacer, which curves up a little bit. So what I have here in front of me is a template for one side of that. I only created one side because then I know if I use this same pattern for both sides, it'll be exactly the same. Because the pattern is only for one side, I can only cut one side at a time. As you can see, I've got a little bit of overhang here on my pattern. So if I were to mark out this cut, flip this board over and mark out the other side, I would be off by the distance of my overhang here. So what I'm going to do is on both pieces, I'm going to trace out one side, rough cut it at the bandsaw, pattern route it, and then repeat on the other side. Okay, I'm laying out the joinery to attach these spacers to the top of the bottom cabinet. And these are going to be attached with a tongue and groove, sort of. So I'm going to route a dado into the top here, and then I'm going to take and cut a rabbet in each side of this and get it down. So I've got about a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch tongue that runs down the center of it. So to cut that, I'm going to be using a router with an edge guide. So that edge guide will set the distance from the side. So I only need to establish that once. I don't need to mark it on both sides. What I need on both sides is my start and stop point. So I'm going to lay out the distance from the side over here so that I can set my router up, and then I'm going to mark out my start and stop points. And I'm making all my references from the back of the piece because I've got this curve in the front. Now I've got my start and stop points established. I'm going to get my router set up. With the dado cut, I can move on to creating the tongue or the tenon on the bottom of the spacer. And I'm going to do this with a dado stack at the table saw. I'll run each side over the blade and then take it over to the dado and test the fit. I'll raise the blade just a hair run it through again, check the fit again, and sneak up on the perfect fit. With the dado fitting perfectly, I'll cut the ends off of either side of the spacer just to give a clean shoulder when it sits down in the dado. The next step is to mark out the mortises for the tenons that will be used to locate the top section onto the spacer. When I'm happy with the placement, I'll carry those center lines down to the side of the spacer so that I can use them for alignment on the slot mortiser. Once the mortises are cut, I'll dry fit the top of the lower case together with a couple drop-in loose tenons and use them to double check my placement for my mortises on the bottom side of the upper assembly. Once I'm comfortable with the placement of the mortises, I'll go ahead and use my router to cut them out. These are going to be through mortises, so I have a backer board set up underneath the piece, and then I'm going to use my router to first establish at full depth the start and stop point of the mortise. Then I'll use my depth stop to go back and route just a little bit at a time, working my way down the settings until the cut is all the way through. The next step is to add in some threaded inserts into the top of the spacer to actually be able to secure the top assembly to the lower one. However, after marking these out, I did end up losing the footage I had of me drilling it out. So here I'm marking them out, putting their placement in, but as you can see in this shot, I already have that drilled. And with them drilled out, I can transfer those marks over to the upper assembly one at a time using a dowel centering pin tool. Once all 4 holes are marked, I'll drill a pilot hole all the way through so that I can locate it on the opposite side of the board. The bolts are going to need to be recessed, so I use a Forstner bit first to create that recess that the top of the bolts will end up sitting in. And finally, I'll drill the through holes. As you can see, the drill bit caught a couple times on this and ended up pulling the piece up, but it was fine because these are going to need to be elongated anyway. So that means that I'm going to need to file all of these holes to their appropriate size once I'm done. I added a small chamfer to the underside of all of the mortises just to make it a little bit easier to find and locate those slots when I drop the top on. And with everything dry assembled again, you can see how this is going to work. The top will drop on locating using the tenons, and then 4 bolts will be inserted from the inside of the top and tightened down. This will give a solid connection everywhere from the base of the lower cabinet up through the top. And that's going to wrap this one up. I hope you enjoyed it. There are links to the first 4 videos in the notes for this video. Also, this entire project is going to be posted on the simplecove.com guild section, and there'll be plans available there as well as a detailed article on the build. I hope you'll come back for part 6. In that video, I'm going to be building the leg assembly that sits on the right side of the desk. It's got lots of curves and also some interesting knockdown hardware. Thanks a lot. Hope to see you then.